Friends, thank you for joining the second part. If you missed the first part, the comment link is provided. I closed the book and looked around my living room. The photos were back on the walls. My sewing machine sat in the corner, a half-finished dress draped over it. The house smelled like the jasmine tea I loved and the bread I'd baked that afternoon. It wasn't perfect. I was still alone. I still didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. Because I'd learned something crucial: you can't save people who are drowning if they're determined to pull you under with them. Sometimes you have to let go and swim to shore yourself. 3 months passed. 3 months of silence from Cassandra. At first, I waited. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. Every time there was a knock at the door, I hoped it was her. But slowly, that hope transformed into something else: acceptance. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. My days developed a new rhythm. I woke early and tended the small garden I'd planted in the backyard: tomatoes, herbs, flowers. I joined Roser for coffee twice a week. I even started teaching sewing classes at the community center on Tuesday evenings. The women who came were like me: older, overlooked, hungry for something that was theirs. We sat in a circle with our machines humming, and we talked. About our lives, our regrets, our small rebellions. One woman, Patricia, told us how she'd spent 40 years cooking meals her husband criticized. Now that he was gone, she'd thrown out every single one of his recipes and only made food she loved. But they can't, I said. I removed them from the deed. Emma interrupted gently. Did you ever take them off the deed? My blood ran cold. The deed. In all the chaos with the bank accounts and the power of attorney, I'd focused on my money. But the house. Last year when you signed those papers, Emma continued, one of them added Cassandra as a co-owner of the property. My dad's specialty is real estate law. He knows how to make these things look legitimate. I felt dizzy. Why are you telling me this? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Because he did the same thing to my mother. Convinced her to put his name on her house, then slowly maneuvered her out. When she fought back, he made her look unstable. She lost everything. She wiped her eyes. I was 12. I watched him destroy her. And now I see him doing it to you, and I couldn't stay silent. Emma. He's not a good man, Mrs. Torres. And I think Cassandra is learning from him. Whatever she used to be, he's teaching her to be something worse. We sat in silence. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows. What happened to your mother? I asked softly. She rebuilt. It took years, but she did it. She's actually the one who encouraged me to find you. Emma smiled sadly. She said if she'd had someone warn her, maybe things would have been different. I took Emma's hand. Thank you. For your courage. What will you do? She asked. I looked up at the darkening sky. A single star was visible through the haze of city lights. I'm going to fight, I said. And this time, I'm going to win. The next morning, I was at David's office before it opened. They're going to try to sell my house, I told him, showing him Emma's photos and explaining everything. David's expression grew grim. Let me make some calls. Within hours, he'd filed an emergency motion to freeze any sale of the property. He also pulled the original deed paperwork and discovered what I'd feared: Cassandra's name had indeed been added as a co-owner through a quitclaim deed I'd signed, buried among other estate planning documents. This is tricky, David admitted. Legally, as a co-owner, she does have rights. But, he held up a finger, if we can prove you signed under duress, or that you didn't understand what you were signing, we can challenge it. How? Did anyone witness you signing these documents? Did anyone explain them to you in detail? I thought back. Richard handed me the papers. Cassandra stood next to me. They said it was to protect the house, to make sure it stayed in the family. I trusted them. Did they pressure you? Rush you? I closed my eyes, remembering. Cassandra said, "Mom, if you love me, you'll sign this. It's just a formality." And Richard kept checking his watch, saying they had an appointment to get to. David nodded grimly. That's undue influence. Combined with the financial exploitation, we have a case. What happens now? Now we fight. But Mrs. Torres, he looked at me seriously, this is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my purple dress, my sewing circle, my garden, the life I was building. I didn't survive 70 years to surrender now, I said. The papers were served to Cassandra and Richard at their hotel. I wasn't there, but Emma told me later that Cassandra threw the documents across the lobby and screamed that I was being manipulated by outside influences. It's funny how people who manipulate you always accuse others of doing exactly what they've done. 2 days later, my phone rang. Cassandra. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered what Roser had told me, as sometimes you need to hear the storm to appreciate the calm. I answered. How could you? Cassandra's voice was shaking with rage. How could you take Emma's word over mine? That girl is disturbed. She's always had issues with Richard. Stop, I said calmly. No, I won't stop. You're my mother. Then act like I'm your mother. My voice rose. Not your retirement fund. Not your real estate investment. Your mother. The woman who raised you alone after your father left. The woman who worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. The woman who loved you so much she forgot to love herself. Silence. You're turning into someone I don't recognize, as she said, her voice cold now. Good, I replied. Because the person you recognized was too easy to erase. This is Richard's daughter poisoning you against us. No, Cassandra. This is me finally seeing clearly. Emma didn't tell me anything I didn't already know deep down. She just gave me permission to stop lying to myself. If you go through with this lawsuit. You'll what? I interrupted. Stop talking to me. You already did that. Disown me? You already treated me like I was nothing. Take away your love? I can't lose something I don't have. I could hear her breathing, ragged and harsh. I'm your daughter, as she said, and for the first time, she sounded uncertain. Yes, I said softly. You are. And I will always love the little girl who held my hand and told me I was the best mama in the world. But that little girl grew up into someone I don't know. Someone who looks at her mother and sees $signs. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. So what now? She asked. You just, what? Write me off? No, I said. I hold you accountable. I protect myself. And I hope, God, Cassandra, I hope that someday you'll understand why. I'll never forgive you for this, as she whispered. That's okay, I said, and meant it. I've already forgiven myself. And that's all I need. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From release. The legal battle took for months. It was exhausting, expensive, and emotionally devastating. But I had something Cassandra didn't: a community. Rosa organized a fundraiser to help with legal costs. The women from my sewing class showed up to court every single day, a silent wall of support. Emma testified about her father's pattern of behavior. Even my old neighbors, people I'd barely talked to in years, came forward with statements about how they'd witnessed Cassandra's treatment of me. I'd thought I was alone. Turns out, I'd just been looking in the wrong direction. David was brilliant. He presented the timeline of documents, the financial withdrawals, the testimonies. He painted a clear picture of a vulnerable woman being systematically exploited by her own child. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to everything with an unreadable expression. When it came time for closing arguments, Cassandra's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused elderly woman being manipulated by outside parties. Then the judge asked Cassandra a single question. Ms. Torres, do you love your mother? Cassandra froze. Of course I do. Then why, the judge said quietly, did you try to sell her home without her knowledge? The courtroom went silent. We thought she'd be safer. Answer the question I asked, the judge said firmly. Why did you attempt to sell her home without telling her? Cassandra looked at Richard. At her lawyer. At me. Because, as she finally whispered, we needed the money. The judge nodded slowly. At least you're honest now. The ruling came down a week later. The quitclaim deed was voided. Cassandra's name was removed from my property. I was ordered to be reimbursed for the misappropriated funds, though David warned me I might never see that money. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the principle. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt the sun on my face. Rosa hugged me tightly. Emma squeezed my hand. The women from my sewing circle cheered. And in the parking lot, standing by her car, I saw Cassandra. She looked small. Defeated. Lost. For a moment, our eyes met. I could have walked past her. Could have ignored her the way she'd ignored me for months. Instead, I walked over. Cassandra, I said gently. She looked up, her eyes red. You won. Congratulations. I didn't want to win, I told her. I wanted you to wake up. Well, I'm awake now, she said bitterly. I hope you're happy. No, I said honestly. I'm not happy. But I'm free. And someday, maybe you will be too. Free from what? From whatever made you think my value was measured by what you could take from me. I paused. I love you, Cassandra. I always will. But I can't let you destroy me to save yourself. She started to cry, real tears this time, not manipulation. I don't know how we got here. One compromise at a time, I said. One small betrayal. One justified theft. Until you forgot I was human. Can we ever? She trailed off. I don't know, I said truthfully. But if we do, it has to be different. I won't be your mother and your victim. I turned to walk away, then looked back. The door isn't locked, I told her. But you have to knock. And you have to mean it. That night, I sat in my garden under the stars. My journal open on my lap. Day 127. Today I won a battle. But more importantly, I reclaimed myself. And I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to be their crutch. I looked up at the sky, at the infinite stars. I did it, am I amor, I whispered to my husband's memory. I finally did it. The wind rustled through the leaves, and somewhere in the night, I swear I heard him whisper back. I knew you would, Maggie. I always knew. 6 months after the trial, my life had become something I barely recognized, in the best possible way. My sewing classes had grown. What started as 6 women in a cramped community centre room had expanded to 20, then 30. We'd had to move to a larger space. But it wasn't just about sewing anymore. It had become a sanctuary for women who'd spent their lives making themselves smaller. Women who'd forgotten their own names under the weight of other people's expectations. We called ourselves the Needle and Thread Society, because we were all learning to stitch ourselves back together. Patricia had started a small catering business, finally cooking food she loved. Helen's paintings were displayed in a local gallery. And Rosa had reconnected with her estranged sister after 30 years of silence. We were a community of survivors, teaching each other that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Emma had become like a daughter to me, the kind I'd always hoped to have. She visited twice a week, sometimes just to sit in my garden and talk. She told me about her own healing journey, how confronting her father had freed something in her she didn't know was trapped. You inspired me, she said one afternoon while we planted tulip bulbs. Watching you fight back, it made me realize I didn't have to keep carrying his shame. We teach people how to treat us, I told her, patting soil around a bulb. And sometimes the teaching is just showing them we won't accept their treatment anymore. She smiled. My therapist says the same thing. Smart woman, your therapist. She is. You'd like her. Emma paused, her hands stilling in the dirt. Have you heard from Cassandra? I had. Sort of. 3 months after the trial, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mom. I don't know how to start this. I've written this letter 17 times and thrown it away 16 times. This is the one I'm actually sending because I realized I'll never find the perfect words. You were right about everything. About Richard, about me, about what I'd become. We've separated. Not because of the trial, though that was the catalyst, but because I finally saw what you'd been trying to show me. He was teaching me to be someone I despise. I'm in therapy now. 3 times a week. Dr. Morrison says I have significant unresolved attachment issues and a maladaptive coping mechanisms. Fancy words for I treated the person who loved me most like garbage because I was terrified of becoming her. That sounds insane, I know. But it's true. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing your sacrifices as weakness. Your kindness as foolishness. Your unconditional love as something I could exploit because it would never run out. I was wrong. About all of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking to come home. I haven't earned it. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And I'm so sorry for the years I spent being blind. If you never want to speak to me again, I understand. If you do, I'll be here. Trying to become someone worthy of your love. Your daughter, Cassandra. I read that letter 50 times. I cried over it. I held it against my chest. I showed it to Roser, to Emmer, to David. What will you do? Roser asked gently. I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to run to her. Part of me is still too wounded. Then wait, Roser said wisely. Wait until both parts agree. I waited 2 months before I responded. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to be sure. Sure that I was strong enough. Sure that opening the door wouldn't mean letting her walk all over me again. When I finally felt ready, I didn't write a letter. I called. She answered on the first ring. Mom? Her voice was tentative, hopeful, terrified. Hello, Cassandra, I said calmly. Silence. Then, you called. I did. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. But then I realized something. Refusing to forgive you doesn't hurt you. It hurts me. It keeps me chained to what you did instead of letting me move forward. Does that mean? She trailed off, afraid to hope. It means I'm willing to try, I said carefully. But things are different now. I'm different now. I know. I want different. I need different. Then here are my terms, I said, using the same firm voice I'd used in the courtroom. We meet once a month. In public, at first. You continue therapy. You don't ask me for money, you don't make decisions about my life, and if I say no to something, you respect it. Yes, she said immediately. Yes to all of it. And Cassandra? If you ever treat me the way you did before, I will walk away permanently. No second chances. I understand, as she whispered. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me. I gave up on who you were, I said softly. I'm choosing to believe in who you might become. Our first meeting was at a cafe, the same one where I'd confronted her months before. She arrived early. I saw her through the window, sitting nervously, checking her phone, watching the door. When I entered, she stood so quickly she almost knocked over her coffee. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. But there was something else too, something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Hi, Mom, as she said softly. Hello, Cassandra. We sat down. For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. I made this. In a woodworking class I've been taking. It's not very good, but... I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small wooden box, roughly made but clearly crafted with care. On the lid, she'd burned a simple phrase. For the woman who taught me that love requires respect. My throat tightened. Cassandra. I know it doesn't fix anything, she said quickly. I know it doesn't erase what I did. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Really trying. I opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I opened it and saw a check for $47,000. The exact amount she'd taken. I've been working, she explained. 2 jobs. I sold my car, most of my jewelry. It's taken me 6 months, but it's all there. Every penny. I stared at the check, then at my daughter. Tears were streaming down her face. I can't take back what I did, Ishi said. But I can make it right. Or at least start to. I folded the check and put it back in the box. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. This is a start, I said. A good start. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. She told me about therapy, about the things she was learning about herself. About how Richard had played on her insecurities, making her feel like she was never enough unless she had more. He made me believe that your contentment was a weakness, Ishi said. That your happiness with a simple life meant you lacked ambition. And I bought into it because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Of where I came from. Of our little house and our thrift store clothes and our homemade dinners. She looked down. All my friends had parents with big houses and fancy cars, and I had you, wonderful, loving you, and I convinced myself that love wasn't enough. And now? I asked gently. Now I know that love is everything. And everything else is just our stuff. The months that followed weren't easy. Healing never is. There were setbacks. Times when old patterns tried to resurface. Times when she said something thoughtless and I had to remind her of our boundaries. Times when I caught myself slipping back into old habits of over-accommodating. But there were also breakthroughs. The first time she apologized without making excuses. The first time she asked about my life instead of just talking about hers. The first time she came to my sewing class and sat with the other women, listening to their stories. The first time she called just to say I love you without wanting anything. Slowly, carefully, like a plant growing through concrete, we were building something new. Not the relationship we'd had before, that was gone forever. Something better. Something built on truth instead of obligation. 1 year after the trial, I hosted a dinner at my house. My first real dinner party in years. Rosa came, with her sister. Emma came, with her mother, a strong, graceful woman who hugged me tight and whispered, "A thank you for showing my daughter what survival looks like." The women from my sewing class came. David came. Even some of my old neighbors showed up. And Cassandra came. Tentatively, nervously, holding a homemade pie that was slightly burned on one side. I made it myself, Ishi said apologetically. It's not as good as yours. It's perfect, I told her. Because you made it. We gathered around my table, the same table where I'd once felt invisible. But tonight, surrounded by these women and men who'd helped me remember myself, I felt more seen than ever. As we ate and laughed and told stories, I looked around the room. At these beautiful, broken, resilient people who'd all survived something. Who'd all chosen to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. This was my real family. The one I'd built from ruins. After dinner, Cassandra helped me with the dishes. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. "Mom," Ishi said finally. "Yes?" "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me?" I dried my hands and turned to face her. "I already have, Cassandra. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past poison the future." "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you," Ishi said. "No," I said firmly. "You'll spend the rest of your life being better. Not for me, for yourself. That's all I want. For you to become someone you're proud of." She hugged me then, and I let her. Really let her, without holding back or protecting myself. "I love you, Mom," Ishi whispered. "I love you too, Major," I said. "I always have." even when I had to love you from a distance. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my garden under the stars. My journal open on my lap, a pen in my hand. Day 365. 1 year ago, I walked out of my old life. Today, I'm sitting in the middle of my new one. And I understand now that the greatest act of love is sometimes refusing to accept less than you deserve. Not for pride. Not for revenge. But for survival. For dignity. For the sacred duty we have to ourselves. I paused, looking up at the infinite sky. I've learned that you can't pour from an empty cup. That silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's surrender. That the people who demand your gratitude are usually the ones who deserve it least. And that it's never, ever too late to choose yourself. I closed the journal and pressed it against my heart. Thank you, I whispered to the universe, to my husband's memory, to the woman I'd been who was brave enough to become who I am. The wind carried the scent of jasmine and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car passed. Life, ordinary and beautiful, continued. And I was finally part of it again. Here's what I want you to remember from my story. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not obligated to shrink so others can feel bigger. And you are never too old, too tired, or too late to reclaim your own life. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. The ones who don't, or well, they were never loving you, they were using you. I'm 70 years old now. I don't have everything figured out. But I have something more valuable. I have myself back. And if this old woman can stand up after a lifetime of bending, so can you. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and leave a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, what's one boundary you need to set for yourself? Let's support each other. Remember, the strongest thing you can say is sometimes the smallest word, no. This is Margaret Torres, reminding you that your life is yours to live. Don't let anyone, not even family, take that away from you. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and never forget your worth.